I enjoy the whole process of making a track from start to finish by myself. It's kind of a weird one because usually an artist would have a producer working alongside them, or if the track's being mixed by the artist, they would be sent off to a mastering engineer for the final touches. But I almost feel that it's not my music and I'm cheating if I don't do the entire process myself. There's so much I've learned each time I released a new track, and without working on a project on my own terms and in my own time, I definitely wouldn't be as confident as a producer as I am a performer. But with all that, it does mean that it's very hard to consistently know what the right decisions are musically. There's no one that can give me feedback, and there's no one to help me with the decision-making process. It's just me and a computer, but actually that's just how I like it really. If the challenge isn't there, neither is the enjoyment. Going to be using Logic for this session. As you can see already, I've got the original track in the session just so I can refer back to it. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with 105, 107 BPM. That's the bulk of the entire piano track, I guess. Later on there's like a kind of clap sound. Alright, well let's go with that. Just might double these like a couple of times. In some ways, there isn't much more to it than that. There's like a bass synth. What I might do is just get rid of all of the high frequencies because we don't need those right now. Yeah, I just want it to be like one tone, I think. The bass won't come in right at the beginning. I'm just getting a kind of flavour as to what the main backing track will sound like when all the instruments are in. And then I can kind of focus on structure and stuff. I'm just making this up as I go along really. I don't really have a specific plan as to how this is going to go. So I think after that, we want a sort of soft kick drum. So basically none of these. You know, you can literally spend like hours just trying to find... Oh, there's loads of claps here. So in the event that I sometimes find like a potential thing that could be useful, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep that and just call it clap library, question mark. As in like, I might use that later. I'm just going to double that track and then carry on. You know what, let's just go with that for now. God, it sounds so lame at the moment. I actually hate the sound of that clapping. It just kind of sounds a bit lacking, but with it. Nice, as if I start off with the main melody of the Havana theme, having a kind of response. I do want something quite like that, but... I think at that point I'm just going to put the kick in, and I'm pretty sure... And to be honest, I'm never that careful when it comes to just jotting down ideas. I just kind of... Oh yeah, so I found this library. I do like multiple hi-hats. I think that's quite cool. Let's just quantize that. So, I mean, I'm just kind of adding stuff, but I think there's still some more things that could be added. I really want to try out a djembe groove, and then I can just go like something like that. What does that sound like if it's got quite a lot of distortion on it? This thing's great. The other thing I really want to add. Now this thing is just, I mean... See, that to me is just so much more interesting than... It's just like lost all of its kind of momentum and groove. I wonder if I can just have a whole section where it's just like really like dirty and disgusting. I shouldn't really get ahead of myself, but I feel like it needs some slap bass. Just a little bit of bounce on the offbeats. Yeah. Let's just have a little kind of hammer on thing. Oh. It's getting further and further away from the original, which I quite like. Maybe it'd be nice to have like a shaker or something. So yeah, the djembe needs to be a bit more exciting there, I think. Alright, yeah, that's too much djembe. Now usually at this point I... What was that? Wob 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 wob. Why is it snowing? It's March. Anyway, so I was listening back to this bit. Yeah, there's just something missing. Don't know, it needs to kind of lead in, because at the moment it just kind of goes and it's pretty boring. So I'm going to hopefully try and figure that out right now. Yeah, that to me just sounds so much more interesting. It's got a bit more lead in and oomph. I think what might be nice there is like a kind of call and response thing, where it's like a in the center, and then like on the left and right it's like the same thing, like a and mute that. Yeah, it makes it a bit more interesting than just having like one trumpet playing the whole thing. I think that bit, that bit can be call and response, I reckon. It's still snowing. What is going on? So it turns out I forgot to screen record about an hour's worth of me working on the track, but just quickly, just not keen on this intro. I think it was just too long, so I've shortened it and I borrowed this melody from the Improvisation 2, which is, now it sounds a bit like this. Just sounds a bit more snappy, and it's kind of getting to the point quicker. I found like the 8-bar intro was too long and it wasn't really doing anything, and this reverse clap gives it that extra momentum to go straight into this melody, which is the sort of Havana melody which everyone knows. And then I also sorted out this chorus bit at the end, just because I had to go and I didn't actually manage to finish recording the chorus. This is what we've got now. And then, yeah, it goes straight into the second improvisation, verse 2, whatever you want to call it. After the chorus, I'm thinking of having like something completely different, which is back to that cajon ensemble idea. And then I just added a little thing on the keyboard using this instrument. Sounds pretty cool. So I'm going to try and develop that. So I guess the next thing to add is some djent. So if you look at that and go, oh, he's cheating and he's copying notes, that's because I can't be bothered to record the same note again. It's just easier. I'm going to re-record everything. So I think the next thing to do is to look at this Improvisation 2. I'm basically going to do exactly what I did there. I'm just going to like add a few like harmonies and kind of accentuate certain phrases. So, and this is what I've been doing quite a lot on the first improvisation. I didn't really talk about it that much just because I was in the zone and just wanted to get my ideas down. But for example, where I'm playing, just did a sort of 3-part harmony to that. By doing that, I've just given certain phrases a bit more power and a bit more attention in the mix. So it's quite cool because we've got like the main melody, we've got additions, and then we've also got a response to the main melody, which is these kind of harmonies here. What I might do is have these harmonies more in the background, because at the moment it's all kind of the same volume and it all kind of sounds like it's sort of fighting for space, whereas if I have all of these harmony bits a little quieter, let me see if I can make it so that it just kind of sounds a little less like they're all fighting to kind of be the biggest ego. Yeah, so just a bit quieter, just so there's a bit more back and forth rather than it just being like consistently loud. Although having said that, I really do like this phrase, so I might just make that a bit louder. These harmonies are now with the main melody, so it makes sense for it to be the same volume now. I've got an idea for like a percussion break where it's just percussion, and then I also really want a bass solo. I just love like this Grove bass. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add some harmonies, add a few kind of call and response ideas, just to fill out the spaces in between when this main solo trumpet isn't playing. So there's a bit I'm trying to figure out at the moment, this bit here. And I want to have like a harmony thing where the harmony works with the melody, but at the moment it doesn't. And I don't want it to just be... That's a little boring. My brain is like not functioning today, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use a keyboard. I'm going to write the MIDI part of what the trumpet's playing and then just create my own harmony. And then I'm going to copy it, then just put it Is it a beat? And then I'm just going to try and figure out the notes. Because you can hear it kind of like there's a few notes that are clashing. Late section, which will then lead us to the final chorus. That's what it needs. The Audio-Technica AT2020, and whilst I think it's a great mic for trumpet, Intone sounded like, and so I wasn't getting a placebo effect of having more expensive mics around me. As just because it's more expensive doesn't mean it sounds any better. I'd record a small Pattern 3, got no idea what it is, but because I've been using it for 10 years or more, related accessories. These two items help to create a slightly darker, more secure and powerful trumpet tone, whilst also evening out the frequency balance through the whole recording. Go check their website out if you're interested in finding more about these products. As I'm playing so close to the mic and with a lot of power, it kind of sounds like someone's hitting the grill quite aggressively without the shield, and it's not a sound you want if you're going for a clean and natural sounding recording. I'm also using an attenuator as my interface doesn't have a pad since it doesn't work for the track, or it's to move away from the mic, which means you without worrying if it's going to clip or distort. I spent 2 days recording all of the trumpets for this track. I split it up into 2 days so that I could save my chops a bit and feel fresh on day 2 to finish the track off. When I'm inside all day and playing trumpet, the combination of no exercise, no sun and sitting down all day makes me feel very lethargic and worn out. And in this case I wanted to feel fresh after a night's sleep to finish off the recording, rather than just cram it into one day and feel like a zombie by the end of it. It was a very exhausting process, to be honest, because I wasn't just focusing on playing the right notes that I'd recorded in my demos, but it was getting the right feel and vibe, the right articulations, the right volume and being consistent with it throughout, especially when I'm taking a few breaks, but also because sometimes I was recording the same part several times, often known as double tracking or quad tracking, and in my case it was often 3 different harmony lines recorded twice or 3 times to get that trumpet section sound. I could easily spend like 10 to 15 minutes on just a couple bars of music. And also you got to get everything in time as well. I always strive to get the source tone as good as I can possibly make it, so I don't need to spend hours processing it with plugins. But the same goes for the performance as well, so I don't need to edit and time align or grid anything. That way, once it's recorded, there's very little to do after the fact, which is always a bonus. So it's day 2, and I can't be arsed. I just had a listen back to some of the takes that I was doing yesterday, and I think I'm going to have to re-record some of it, unfortunately, but it is what it is. That's just part of the process, I guess. Alright, well, let's just get on with it. I think the thing that I struggled with the most was because I was so used to the sound of my demo horns, I didn't immediately like what I did for the recording session because I was so focused on the tone and getting the right notes and it being in time that I kind of forgot about the feel and the articulation, and so a lot of what I recorded sounded quite dull musically because it just lacked feel. So I had to re-record a lot of parts, which was quite mentally draining, but I knew what sounded I wanted to end up with, so it was just a case of getting on and recording until I was happy with it. So it's about 7:30 now, and I'm pretty exhausted, but I've pretty much done the entire track now. That last 1% I'm just going to do tomorrow, once I've had a good sleep and some food as well. I've also got neighbours living upstairs, so I feel like there is a point where I just need to stop playing for their sanity as well as mine. But it's been againly sounding how I want it to as well, which is really good. Yeah, I think it'll be a wrap on the recording. So after the recording session, the first thing to do is to focus on getting the bass solo made for the extended version. I really wanted to try and explore the full capabilities of this virtual instrument by submission that provide a completely different sound world and almost act as a palate cleanse to the overwhelming amount of all the less exciting bits taken out, meaning that the energy is constantly on a high. And mixing, I'm really trying to do one main thing, and that is to maximize the tone and volume of each instrument so that every detail is heard clearly with everything else, no matter how many instruments are playing at any given time. I'm trying to create a balance or blend of sound that is not only clear and crisp, but also rich and wide in audio production. I'm always comparing the two. For example, when you're cutting, it's very similar to just chopping up food or de-seeding a cucumber to create a less watery sound. It goes a long way to make a track sound great or a meal taste great. And I'm always thinking of mixing the same way I think about cooking, and it does actually help to put things into context for me a bit better. It's quite easy to overcomplicate mixing, but it's really just a way in which we bring all our musical ideas together in our best light, and just go through a few things so you can understand my overall goal for the sound of the track. If you'd like me to do a full mix walkthrough, I can definitely do that, but for now I'm just going to keep things brief. So like I said earlier, I was really aiming for a warm and thick sounding trumpet tone, and that extends to the whole raw form without any processing at all. Certain instruments that are very loud and in your face, and there are others like the trumpets, they're